Hello, everyone. We are the Good Doctors of Abbey Research, and welcome to our Season 4 recap episode for Netflix's show, The Crown. I am Dr. Kristen, first.
I'm Dr. Erin, if you don't know.
And I'm pointing because that's where she is on my camera. I don't know where she is on yours. We enter this conversation about The Crown being people who got PhDs in the UK and also know a little bit about British history. Our PhDs are in Northern Irish society and history, so we know quite a lot about that piece of the UK. But we lived through Lizzie's Jubilee in 2012, and I was really glad to get a 4-day weekend for that time. It was great. So we bring maybe a little bit of a different kind of vibe than some other recappers on the internet. Additionally, we run a company that looks really specifically at leadership through a gendered lens, because we believe that all of life is gendered, depending on where you fall on the spectrum, depends on often how you experience the world. So we will be talking about it from that. We are going to recap the season in this, but it is ticker tapes crazy stop tour. We have episodes for every episode, and feel free to go back with us. We also have a bonus video about specifically a Northern Irish context that was mishandled / ignored in two actually in this season. So you've got 12 other videos to enjoy besides this one. If you happen to enjoy spending time with us, we enjoy spending time with you. So I'm going to turn this over now to Dr. Erin, who is going to tell us what happened in the decade of the 80s that was represented by The Crown.
Yeah, season 4, whirlwind tour. We're just going to hit the main points. So we start episode 1, Gold Stick. This is really the only episode in the whole series that's dealt extensively with Northern Ireland, and I use extensively sarcastically because it didn't really very much, but we did a separate video on that. So this is the episode that covers the IRA's assassination of Lord Mountbatten and the various going-ons. We get a little bit from Anne. We get a lot from Charles and Mountbatten and their relationship and how much everyone is pushing Charles towards marriage and away from his continuing affair with the married Camilla Parker Bowles. And we get some really bad potted history of Northern Ireland. We get some Margaret Thatcher being very Margaret Thatchery. And then we get Diana inserted at the end of that conversation. And everyone's kind of saying oh, look, Charles, this young, pretty lady would be a great person to marry. So episode 2, we get the Balmoral test. We go to Scotland again. It looks like lots of crack is had in Balmoral. Charles is sort of seeing Diana. And we have 2 Balmoral tests, a visit from Margaret Thatcher and a visit from Diana. One goes poorly, one goes well. We learn a little bit more about Margaret Thatcher, and we're supposed to be possibly empathetic. We're not.
We can't tell if the show wants us to like her or not, to be completely honest. It goes back and forth. The tonal shifts of this particular season were interesting to us. And one of the major tonal shifts was about how we were supposed to talk about Mags. And this episode is a good example of that.
It is a great example of that. We get some machinations in Thatcher's cabinet, and eventually we kind of see that, Charles is going to settle on Diana. And we also see how much the public and media attention is going to really ramp up with our Diana Spencer. Episode 3 is Fairy Tale. We're getting, which is ironic in this sense, and it's the lead up to the wedding and Diana becoming ensconced in the royal family life. It doesn't go well for her. She is really too young. I'm looking at my notes right now, and I have in bold, all caps, not developmentally ready for this life. Really summarizes this whole episode, but we get introduced a little bit into Diana's struggle, whole lifetime struggle with bulimia, and more about Charles's complicated and problematic relationship with Camilla. The Queen essentially goes to Charles at the end of this and is like, do the thing we're telling you to do. This is your duty. I don't really care if you're unhappy about it. We all know that worked out really well.
Super well.
Episode 4 is a whole episode about having favorite children, with an interesting kind of look into how the Queen feels about her 4 children, and specifically Margaret Thatcher feels about her 2 children. Again, we feel really, really bad for her daughter, Carol, who is not the favorite child. Mark Thatcher goes missing. It's a whole thing.
We understand the timeline was really messed with a lot in this season, but this particular episode, in terms of the actual events, this is an episode that we were confused as to why we spent so much time with Margaret Thatcher and her personal existence and kind of why that looked like. To summarize our feelings about the episode, that and we are continually skeeved whenever Andrew is on camera.
Oh yeah, we were so upset about that. We also get a botched kind of introduction to the Falklands in this.
Yeah.
And Diana is pregnant and Charles is horrible to her, and that is kind of one of the themes of this entire season. Up to episode 5, we get a one-off story of a man named Michael Fagan and his breaking into Buckingham Palace. This is apparently the only episode of the series in which we're going to deal with the fallout from Margaret Thatcher's economic policies, and Fagan is the stand-in symbol for that. So we get a little bit more exploration into how her policies are being perceived, especially around low-income working class parts of England. And Fagan is this everyman who gets the runaround from British bureaucracy as he is trying to find work and get his family back and all of these things. He eventually figures out that he can break into Buckingham Palace rather easily, which is a true story. And the second time he breaks in, he ends up finding the Queen in bed. And, they have the chats. We have no idea in the real world what those actual chats consisted of, but there's some fantastic acting from Olivia Colman in this scene. And you really get a sense for why he felt like the Queen was the only person he could go to. And then the Queen goes to Margaret Thatcher about the economy, and Margaret Thatcher doesn't have a lot of time for that, shockingly. Episode 6 is all about the Wales's trip to Australia, Terra Nullis, and we get a lot of Diana and Charles in this episode. It's really fascinating insight into possibly conversations they might have had about their marriage, deciding to make a go of it, if you will, and then Diana's smashing success and popularity again pisses off child Charles that he is. Diana goes back to the Queen. She's really struggling, but the Queen is like, the press is happy, so what's the matter? We have a lot of thoughts about Elizabeth in this episode that we'll get to later. The hereditary principle in episode 7 is our obligatory Margaret episode, where we let Helena Bonham Carter be Helena Bonham Carter for
and hopefully earn her Emmy.
And hopefully, yes, earn her Emmy. We get a lot of mishmash history in this one as well, including a period where Margaret is in hospital and has surgery on some lung issues that she's having. We also get a little bit of Charles and Diana in this, and her conception of Harry and how that helped a little bit, but didn't really with their marriage. But it's all about Margaret in this episode. She wants a new chapter without men, without cigarettes, without booze. And she, again, wants more royal duties, which, spoiler alert, the Queen's never going to give her. So she gets pushed to the side at the same time that we are celebrating Edward's 21st birthday. And so there can only be so many royals in succession, we learn. She goes down to her private island and drinks a lot. Charles goes down to see her. And then we find out also in this episode about the lost cousins of the Windsor family, Catherine and Nerissa, who are 2 humans who had severe developmental disabilities and who were hidden away because of their connection to the royal bloodline. We get some terrible, terrible insights into possibly how horrible the Queen Mum was, although from her perspective at the time, they didn't have a whole lot of choice. We were really upset with how they dealt with these humans with disabilities in this episode, and we might cover that in our rants. We get up to episode 8, which is all about the Commonwealth and the Queen and Margaret Thatcher butting heads. We go to the Bahamas. Lizzie throws some very specific shade. It does and doesn't work. And then Margaret Thatcher turns her back on all of them. And we see this huge break in a relationship between the Queen and Margaret Thatcher. We get a little bit of some Queen shade as she, in the episode, sends her press secretary to the press to let everyone know that she's upset about the Prime Minister, which doesn't happen ever in the history of things, but it happened at this moment. And Andrew's getting married to Fergie and is mad that he's not getting a lot of attention. So again, not happy with Andrew. Episode 9 focuses again, we're back to Charles and Diana. The principal event of this is an avalanche that the Prince of Wales is caught in while they are in Austria? Geneva. I have no idea.
Somewhere in the Alps.
Somewhere in the Swiss Alps. And it brings Charles and Diana's marriage to a head. Again, they are brought in by the Queen. The Queen's like, are you going to do this or not? And Diana says that she felt reconnected to her marriage because of the threat of losing Charles in this avalanche, and kind of preempts his little speech that he had wrote, because what he really wants to do is get a divorce so he can marry Camilla. We learn a lot about Charles and Camilla in this episode, and we get some great insights from our dear Anne as she tells the truth bombs to both her mother and her brother throughout. We get some terrible planning of anniversary presents in this. We get Diana and her Billy Joel Uptown Girl routine, and then several years later, we get her hijacking of their anniversary and a really bad gift of her doing a private performance from one of our least favorite musicals of all time, The Phantom of the Opera. Really, really ugly stuff from Charles and Diana. Makes us all very uncomfortable, which leads us to our finale, which doesn't feel like a finale, but thank you.
They never do.
Thank you, The Crown, for your consistency in that, titled War. And it really is about the downfall of Margaret Thatcher's premiership, with Sir Geoffrey Howe resigning in the Commons, and the downfall of Charles and Diana. Or is it? Charles complains loads about Diana and how miserable he is. They have a crazy meeting where he implies that her mental health means that she's not able to perform her royal duties and go to New York, but she goes anyway and is an absolute smashing success, including the very famous incident where she hugs a child with AIDS. We get lots more Charles and Camilla, and she understands that if they actually get together after he separates with Diana, she will always be the villain and Diana will always be the victim. We get some Queen and Maggie stuff as she is being pushed out, and we get some way more empathy from the Queen towards Margaret Thatcher than any of us are comfortable with giving. And then we have end on Christmas with the royal family, and everyone is happy and having a great time except Diana, who is miserable. And we get some real heavy conversations between the Queen and Charles and Prince Philip and Diana. And the last thing we see of our 2 seasons with the great and fantastic Olivia Colman is a very sad Emma Corrin as Princess Diana. Whew! That is season 4. For those of you that perhaps wanted a recap and refresh, maybe you're watching this right before season 5. But we have, some things we'd like to say about the content and the story arc and the narrative. Dr. Kristen, what would you like to complain about first?
I want someone else in charge of this show.
If you haven't watched us before, if you've literally just found us now, you should know we're not terribly fond of Peter Morgan.
I just need him to pick a story.
Pick a line. Pick a lane.
Pick a lane. And I think that's what it comes down to for me. So I am not fascinated by a way to personalize Margaret Thatcher. I'm not interested in that show. We are 30 years on, 40 years on from some of her policy decisions, and we've seen the legacy of them. And we've seen what it has brought to Britain. I mean, you can draw a direct through line from her anti-Europeanism to Brexit, which we, spoiler alert, find to be very damaging for the economy, culture, and people of the United Kingdom. So it's just not something I care about. Reading recaps, it didn't seem to be something a whole lot of other people cared about either. So like that was just kind of a mystifying decision on that front. It's just one of those things, like when you do a bunch of things, you do them all mediocre. Like if you want to do a whole season, like for instance, I would love this entire season done from Anne's perspective.
Thank you.
Like, let Anne be the narrator. If you can't have the Crown be the narrator, if you don't want Lizzie to do it, that's fine. Let Anne walk us through the 80s.
Could you imagine the internal monologue that we would get from Princess Anne? It would be captivating television.
I would love it. I would love to know all of the pieces that she holds.
Yeah.
Like, I would love it. The character of Charles is insufferable.
Yes. And we say this often in our recaps, but if you don't know that already, we are being critical of the characters, not the humans. We know they are different. And we have a real inclination to think that this is a very different Charles. Not completely different, but I would really like to hope he's not this horrible.
I sit here as a woman in my late 30s.
Yeah.
As is Dr. Erin. We are, 5 months apart?
Yeah.
4 months apart? 4 months apart. Sorry, I had to do that math.
Okay.
If I behaved, I'm in a family business that is not a royal family, but I'm in a family business. I respect that I actually do more work than Charles ever did. I know what the job is. I know what the job is. I knew what the job was 8 years ago when I agreed to take the job.
Yeah.
And if I know what the job is, and I had 8 years of experience and he has 38 years of experience, I'm unclear as to why he gets to throw a bunch of strops that he doesn't like the job. Yeah. Through time, in memoriam, rich people have married other rich people, not for love. Sociologically, love is something, and the idea of love as a driving force for relationships is actually something that we invented in the 20th century.
It's a pretty new concept. Yeah.
Unions are pragmatic and they are about resources, and they have been forever.
And especially for wealthy people, titled people, they are business.
They are business decisions. This is a business merger. Why are you throwing adolescent strops over something you knew was always going to happen? And why are you the only one who is enough of an entitled jackass that you're dragging everyone else down with you? Like, if you had just been upfront with poor Diana and said, hey, by the way, I'm not dropping my mistress.
I need an heir and a spare.
I need an heir and a spare, and I'll let you live your life. Let me tell you the number of romance novels that I have read where that's the exact conversation that happens. I don't know. Off the top of my head, at least 30. So like these, you could have used your words, kid.
Yeah.
And you didn't, for any number of reasons, including the fact that in real life, historians tell us that he was quite taken with her.
Yes.
So fine. A year and a half in, when you realize that you have nothing in common and you can't do anything together, stop expecting to spend time together. There's some real British pragmatism that we are missing in this.
We're missing
what happened to keeping a stiff upper lip, folks? Like,
oh. And so I couldn't think of a better word than when you just said insufferable. Like, this version of Charles is insufferable.
I didn't want to spend any time with him.
No, I don't. Like, all the sympathy and empathy that they built for his childhood and the way he was treated by his parents in the third season, which is a real thing.
A real thing, because he's the job and not a human. And that's a whole other category of a human rights violation.
Was completely washed away by his continuously throwing all the toys out the pram anytime he felt like it.
And every woman in his life, including the one he's sleeping with, the one he's and the two he's related to, are like, pal, you don't get to do this.
Diana knew. Camilla knew. Anne knew. Elizabeth knew. Grandma knew. Margaret knew. I'm
not even knowing that the UK is a country, and I'm knowing this. Like, this is not a mystery.
All the people in your life know this is who you are, who you were born to be. Does it suck? Probably. Do you wish you could marry Camilla? Cool. Camilla seems happy enough with her husband. That's another story. But like, we knew this. We knew this. So why am I spending so much time with you whining? And that is our question for Peter Morgan. I had a thought while you were talking about Margaret Thatcher that I would like to explore with you. That I think, and we might have explored this, forgive me, I might not remember, in our past series discussions or season discussions, but I think he focuses so much on the right casting for these people that then he lets the casting dictate the narrative.
Yes. So
like,
also, when he was writing this, he was dating Gillian Anderson. We just need to
yeah,
say that.
but also, like, aside from that, Gillian Anderson's a phenomenal actress.
Why don't you want to use her? I get it.
Why wouldn't you want to use her? And so he gets these people, and I mean, so maybe the first 2 seasons it was less of that, because I mean, a lot of people,
the first 2 seasons he was just obsessed with Margaret.
Right. And, you know, because they were younger, we didn't necessarily have as established actors. Like, nobody knew who Claire Foy was. A lot of people knew sort of who Matt Smith was. If they were fans of Doctor Who, he was a lot more known in the UK than he was here in the US. But they were more relatively unknown. Like, nobody knew who Vanessa Kirby was, really. And she played Margaret. So I think he wanted to do a lot of the setup, right? So there was a lot of prescriptive narrative that he had to kind of follow to get to this point. And now I feel like seasons 3 and 4, he's like, look at all the great people I can cast. And now they're dictating the narrative. So we get way more of Margaret Thatcher than we wanted to. I would like to believe we would have gotten a lot of Olivia Colman because of that casting choice. And then it makes me wonder if maybe his personal life was dictating more of this season.
See, and here's the thing, like, I love Gillian Anderson.
She's phenomenal.
She's doing a great job from what I can see. I don't want to spend any time with Margaret Thatcher. So we are coming at this from a very particular perspective. So we need to say that as well. This is a personal review. My dramaturgically, however, I still stand behind the idea that he cannot decide what story he is trying to tell.
Yeah.
Regardless of my personal feelings about the stories, he is trying to tell too many.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand the machinations behind this. It feels like Netflix is writing him blank checks. So I don't know how much they're even interfering with him. But so they told him he could only have 6 seasons. Why couldn't you, like, why did you feel the need to go? Like, the lady is like in her 90s. You can't tell an entire Crown experience. Like, I don't know, like, narrow a little.
Yeah.
It all feels like it also feels like a little bit like he got a little bit of success and now it's all gone to his head and he just gets to play around, which is fine, but not what I'm interested in watching. And yet, like an idiot, we keep coming back expecting something to be different. So we are actually not 100% sure we're covering 5 and 6. We need to say that because we're not sure what stories they're going to tell. And we're not sure if we're even going to be able to have leadership conversations the way that we want to have them, because we're just not sure what it's going to look like. We anticipate watching them. But if all we can do is yell, I'm not sure you guys really want to watch that. So we'll be holding that in question.
Yeah.
But in terms of a show about leadership, I would have wanted the whole thing to be Maggie and Olivia and not dealt with Charles and Diana at all if we were doing that.
Yeah, but you can't not talk about Charles and Diana.
You can't not talk about Charles and Diana in the 80s. And it's like, so the show we're covering next in this timeline of Abby research videos is Bridgerton. And one of my main complaints with Bridgerton is that it should have been 10 episodes and not 8, and it cheated us out of quite a few things at the back half of the season because they had to rush. This, I wonder if he had only been given 8 episodes, if he could have tightened it up.
Yeah, and we talk about this through our individual episode recaps in more detail, but there were a couple of episodes that, while they were very good individually, and Fagin was one of them, they didn't fit within the narrative of the show. And
that we could ascertain.
The narrative arc of this season. And it was really interesting to me that, like, the 2 episodes that I thought were the most well done were like the ones that didn't fit. And I was like, cool, but like, what story are you telling? And if we are not going to deal with Northern Ireland at all, don't deal with it.
Yeah.
If you're not going to
kill Mountbatten off screen.
Yeah. If you're not going to deal with Margaret Thatcher's economic policies at all, like then don't deal with it. But giving us like snippets of it was just jarring.
Spending time with the whole thing about the favorite son is really the breaking point for me in the narrative of Margaret Thatcher, because that doesn't inform her policies beyond the fact that she won't. So the most significant policy that gossip says is that Margaret Thatcher wouldn't sign the sanctions against apartheid because her son owned businesses with in the apartheid government and got quite a lot of money from the apartheid government.
Yeah.
That's fine. I didn't need a whole episode about how he's her favorite son for her to just drop that in. And she could just say, my son, Mark, owns businesses down there. And all of us who are adults in the world would have connected those dots. So that episode, now, do you want to talk to me about Elizabeth's favorite children and how it affected Anne and Charles and why she has blind spots to Andrew? Because I have so many questions. His poor daughters. That's fascinating. Chase that. Yeah. But I don't need Dennis and Maggie around the dinner table. Like, it was just too much Maggie. Like, you can still showcase Julian Anderson. Like, still showcase her. She's incredible. But I didn't need her inner life. We never got that with another prime minister. Why do I need it with Maggie if you're not going to focus?
We got it a little bit. We got it with Churchill. We did.
A little with Churchill. But, like, we certainly spent more legislative time with others.
We spent so much time on Anthony Eden.
We spent a lot of time on Eden. Like, it was very confusing to me what he was trying to do. I know we've said that 400 times, but that's what it comes back to.
Yeah.
And for me, when I'm narratively watching something and I don't have confidence in the person knows what they're doing, it's really hard for me to settle in. And it's really hard for me. This is why Lost is so problematic for me to ever do a rewatch, because I don't ever feel like they knew what they were doing. Now looking back, like watching it live, we had been told this one thing. And so I was like, okay, they have it under control. And then that one thing was no longer true. And so now I'm like, what are we doing? This is why I didn't love The Leftovers for this reason. Like when I don't feel like you have control of the story, it makes me feel very unsettled. And that's how I feel like with The Crown, where I'm waiting for shoes to drop at every single moment. And it's not a pleasant viewing experience.
Yeah. And I think it's such a shame because, to go back to our casting conversation, they do a phenomenal job. And like, to pick out bright spots of this season, like the casting and the acting, individual acting by these actors.
Incredible. And the costuming and the sets and
like, so much of the visual storytelling is still like top level TV.
It's beautiful to look at.
We complained about wasting Olivia Colman in season 3. We got a bit more of her in season 4, but it's still a waste of her talent.
Tobias Menzies continues to shine. His Philip is perfection.
Yeah, he was really great. And like, I think in fairness to Peter Morgan, he did a good balance of Philip in this season.
Yes.
We didn't get too much inexplicable Philip time, which we got in the first season because it was like Tobias Menzies. As insufferable as Charles's character was, Josh O'Connor was magnificent. Give him all the things. Emma Corrin was fantastic. Give her all the things.
Emerald, what's her face as
Emerald
Camilla? Emerald Farrell, yeah.
Yeah, whatever. As Camilla Parker Bowles, she did a great job. But then I say that and I'm like, yeah, the acting was so fantastic, but why were some of the stories such shit? Because then I feel like you're wasting all that acting talent. And now they are no more. We will transition, I guess, to talking about possibly season 5. We have only cast the Queen and Philip and Margaret. And the Queen will be Imelda Staunton, who I think will be phenomenal, even though every time I look at her, I see Dolores
Umbridge. Yep.
The Prince Philip is going to be Jonathan Pryce,
who Americans know for trying to sell them Lexuses.
I was about to say, I don't know why Americans would know him.
Pirates of the Caribbean. He's in the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie.
Pirates, yeah.
Keira Knightley's dad. Yeah.
If you watched the 2 popes, he played Pope Francis.
And if you saw Miss Saigon in the original Broadway run, he was inappropriately whitewashed cast as the engineer, who is a Vietnamese character. And one of the biggest controversies in it might have been West End, I can't remember, but one of the biggest controversies in theater history is that he was cast as a Vietnamese character.
Oh, No.
She's on the original cast recording as singing the engineer's songs, and it is so cringy and terrible. It makes me so angry because I love that musical.
Yes, it's a fantastic musical. And Jonathan Pryce was fantastic, so I have every confidence he'll be great. And then I can see your woman who's going to play Margaret, but I can't remember her name. She's very British. You'll know her from all of the masterpieces if you Google her face.
The thing is, like, we also don't know quite where we're going to fall. So we end in 1990. Diana does not live a lot longer. And then after Diana's death, the public relationship with the crown is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest piece of British history in the back half of the 90s is Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
And then we hit 9/11 and we hit Tony Blair going to war with Bush. Like, where are you?
Nervous about how much Northern Ireland takes over British history.
Like, it's from 94 to 98. It's a big chunk. And it's one of the reasons that Tony Blair became party leader of the Labour Party, was that he had solutions and relationships. So, like, I don't know where we're going in season 5. And I would have liked to spend more time in the 80s, I think is what it comes down to. Like, give us more Charles and Diana, give us more, I don't know, let us hang out with the kids a little bit. Like,
oh my God, we didn't even deal with Wales and like the massive, massive minor strike that happened in the 80s. Kristen, I just remembered that we didn't even
deal with the minor strike, and we didn't deal
referenced. We didn't even get a news bulletin.
No. And ironically, because we spent so much time in Wales in season 3 with Charles's investiture, I would have thought they would have done the minor strike in
and Aberfan. Like they introduced mining in Wales specifically with the Aberfan disaster.
We don't get the strike. We also don't really ever talk about water for milk situation, the controversy there. We don't talk about her shutting down the docks in Glasgow. Like, there's a lot we didn't talk about, which is,
y'all,
the UK is 4 countries.
We don't know.
And a lot of British media pretends it is just England. The BBC, I love them, but they very much treat everything like it's London. They're not great about even covering the Midlands or understanding that Yorkshire is a very different culture from Cornwall, everything else. And every single piece of media that flattens the UK into a monoculture angers me. Mm-hmm. And that is a personal thing. And this does that. It mm-hmm. flattens it into a monoculture. Mm-hmm. And there's so many things. And the Queen is the Queen of the Commonwealth. And you've focused on England, and that's fine. But there's also, like, we got an episode on apartheid because the Queen inserted herself in apartheid. But we don't get an episode on we don't really talk about the Queen's opinions on the Falklands because she's not supposed to have one. We didn't in season 1 talk about the civil war in India. We didn't talk about the partition of India and Pakistan. Those are just, according to the Queen, as important to her as Aberfan. Mm-hmm. So there's just been a really interesting, I mean, he very obviously, to me, did not write a cohesive series. He's writing season to season, and then not doing any continuity back in the characters he created. Somebody, I think it was the Vulture article, pointed out that there's some conversation that Margaret has in this season that is like directly contradicts something that Margaret said in season 1. And it's like, well, yeah, people are allowed to grow and change, but like acknowledge that. Have Olivia Colman say, that's not what you used to say.
Yeah. You haven't shown us this change. You're just snapping your fingers and they're different. Yeah.
And so it's not an anthology show. You're not Ryan Murphy. You're not telling us you're not Ryan Murphy. You are supposed to be telling us the same story with different actors.
Yeah.
And it just never feels like that to me. So
yeah,
I could go on for a lot longer, but I probably also need to pause here because I'm just going to keep saying the same things and making my blood pressure rise. Do you have anything else to say?
I don't know. I think we've covered some of the key issues. We did get some fascinating leadership comparisons between Margaret Thatcher and the Queen in several of the episodes. I really wish they would have done more with that and less with Mark Thatcher, just as an example. And I really do feel like he writes season to season, and I feel like he writes based on the actors that he gets, and that's problematic because every actor is different and they're going to bring something different to the character. And especially as you're aging them. And there's a huge difference between Claire Foy and Olivia Colman, and there's a big difference between Olivia Colman and Imelda Staunton. So it makes me nervous for lots of reasons. If you want to learn more about Northern Ireland, we always have that content available, especially from this season. We do a couple of episodes about what they're missing in the 1980s specifically, and we'll see what the 90s bring. Y'all, we're always skeptical of the Crown, but I'm real nervous for the end of the conflict in Northern Ireland and how it's probably not going to show up on the show, and we will have to do a ranty long video about the Good Friday Agreement.
Yeah, I'm going to be curious if they don't cover it, which they may not. I'm going to be curious what else they cover.
Yeah.
Is what that kind of comes down to. Because
aside from Diana's death. Yeah.
Apart from Diana's death, what, like, that's the big thing in the UK in the 90s.
Like the divorce, Diana's death, Northern Ireland. It's really it in the 90s for the UK. I
mean, we get mad cow disease in there somewhere.
Yeah, and Tony Blair's premiership is a big deal, and like
Tony Blair's premiership is a big deal. His restored relationship with the United States, him and Clinton.
Like having a Labour government after like 20 years of conservative governments or even longer is a big deal.
It's just like that's the narrative of like 96, 97, 98. Like once the IRA ceasefire happens in 94.
Yeah.
Like I remember news coverage of Northern Ireland when I was 15. So like if it broke into my incredibly egocentric life, it was a deal.
And we get a bombing campaign on the mainland again from the IRA when they break their ceasefire. So we do,
and so that's a thing.
We get the Canary Wharf.
Manchester, right? Wasn't there? It was a Manchester bomb.
I'm not sure. There's the big one in Canary Wharf.
Yeah, I thought there was a Manchester one too. I could be making that up.
Who knows? So we'll see what content they can come up with for the 90s, the penultimate season of The Crown, and we will probably see you guys then, but we're not sure yet. So whenever
we reserve the right to not have our anger consumed publicly.
If you're watching this immediately following our season 4 coverage, we will see you for Bridgerton next week. If you're watching this at any other time, you can find Bridgerton still on our YouTube channel and all of our playlists below.
Thanks for joining us, guys.
Bye.